Let's get one thing straight right from the beginning. India is not a nation that takes orders, it's a nation that sets its own course. For far too long, people sitting in powerful offices abroad have believed they can dictate terms to the world's largest democracy. Well, that illusion ends here, because what we are witnessing today is not a submissive, hesitant India. It is a bold, unapologetic, and unstoppable India, and it's about time the world got used to it. Assertion of sovereignty stands at the heart of India's response whenever its dignity and independence are questioned. For decades, India has faced situations where larger powers believed they could dictate terms or pressure it into aligning with their interests. But what they often forget is that India's journey to where it stands today has been carved through resilience, self-reliance, and an unshakable belief in its own choices. Sovereignty is not just a word in the Indian context. It is a lived principle, built upon centuries of struggle against domination and reinforced after independence through hard-fought policies that prioritize national interest over outside approval. India's foreign policy has consistently revolved around strategic autonomy, a concept that defines its refusal to become a pawn in the larger games of global powers. When attempts are made to interfere in its decisions, be it through criticism of defense partnerships, economic policies, or international stances, India's immediate instinct is not submission, but assertion, reminding the world that it owes no explanations for actions that safeguard its people and its future. India's sovereignty is also reflected in its willingness to take bold stances even when they do not align with the expectations of powerful nations. Whether it is maintaining ties with multiple global partners despite rivalries between them, rejecting one-sided narratives in global conflicts, or choosing its own path in energy and trade, India demonstrates a clear refusal to let external dictates override internal priorities. This assertion is not confrontational for the sake of confrontation, but stems from a matured understanding of its position as one of the fastest-growing economies and a rising global power. The message that emerges is firm. India will engage with the world on equal terms, not as a subordinate. What makes this assertion even more powerful is the historical weight behind it. A nation that once endured colonial rule now takes immense pride in ensuring that its independence is never compromised again, regardless of how strong the pressure may appear. India has learned through history that allowing others to decide its path leads only to exploitation and stagnation, and thus, in today's age, its sovereignty is guarded with even greater determination. When others attempt to project superiority or issue warnings, India's stance becomes not one of fear, but of calm defiance, showing the confidence of a nation that knows its worth. This sovereign assertion serves as both a shield and a declaration, making clear that India is prepared to cooperate with all but capitulate to none. Rejection of intimidation defines the core of India's approach when confronted with undue pressure or attempts to diminish its global standing. Time and again, powerful voices from outside have tried to corner India by issuing warnings, casting doubts, or attempting to interfere in its internal or external policy choices. But India has consistently refused to buckle under that weight. Instead of retreating, it has often used such moments to showcase its resilience and strategic clarity. When a nation has the confidence that its policies are rooted in long-term national interest, it is not swayed by the noise of criticism or the veiled threats of sanctions. India understands that intimidation is merely a tactic employed by those who fear its rising influence, and the most effective response is not submission, but calm defiance, showing the world that its decisions are beyond manipulation. This rejection of intimidation also stems from India's growing power in the global order. An economy of its size, a military of its strength, and a population with unmatched potential cannot be treated as a junior partner expected to obey instructions. Instead, India has shown that it is willing to chart its own course, whether that involves securing defense agreements that serve its strategic needs, building independent trade relations, or pursuing energy partnerships that others may disapprove of. When powerful countries attempt to issue ultimatums, India's response is often measured yet firm, underscoring that its national interest is non-negotiable. This rejection is not merely a defensive act, but a proactive statement that India is a sovereign nation which deserves to be treated as an equal, not as a subordinate. History has repeatedly reinforced this stance. From the era of the non-aligned movement to the modern age of multipolarity, India has refused to bend its will in the face of external coercion. This consistency in rejecting intimidation has built credibility and respect across the world because nations admire those who stand firm on principle rather than those who bend to pressure. In contemporary times, as India asserts itself on matters of defense modernization, global diplomacy, and economic independence, it continues to demonstrate that intimidation tactics are outdated and ineffective against a country determined to walk its own path. The rejection of such pressure is not just a matter of pride, but a reflection of India's maturity as a confident power, fully aware that real strength lies in the ability to say no, even when the pressure is immense. Economic and strategic power has become one of the strongest pillars of India's global response in the modern era, because it reflects not only growth, but also the ability to shape outcomes beyond its borders. India today is no longer the fragile post-colonial economy it once was, dependent on aid and external guidance. Instead, it is among the fastest-growing economies in the world, commanding attention for its resilience even during global slowdowns. This transformation gives India the leverage to push back against attempts to undermine its choices. A strong economy translates into independence in policy making, as it allows India to invest in its own defense, infrastructure, technology, and innovation without excessive dependence on external powers. The very fact that major global corporations and investors seek entry into India demonstrates the shift in balance, because those who once tried to dictate terms now recognize that their future growth depends on India's market. Strategic power adds another dimension to this strength, because economic clout alone is incomplete without military preparedness and geopolitical positioning. India has invested significantly in modernizing its armed forces, building capabilities in air, land, sea, and space. The acquisition of advanced fighter jets, indigenous missile programs, and the strengthening of naval presence in the Indian Ocean all contribute to a credible deterrence posture. These steps ensure that India is not merely defending itself, but is also positioned to influence the broader security dynamics of Asia and beyond. At the same time, India's strategic partnerships with nations across the world, ranging from defense collaborations to energy corridors, showcase its ability to balance relationships without falling into dependency. This careful calibration highlights that India is not bound by the agendas of others, but instead shapes its own path while keeping doors open to diverse alliances. Economic and strategic power combined give India a voice that cannot be ignored. It allows the country to withstand external pressures, reject one-sided narratives, and assert itself as an indispensable player in global decision-making. When India speaks at international forums, it does so with the confidence of a nation that knows it brings value to the table, not only through ideas, but through tangible strength. This combination of economic momentum and strategic capability sends a clear message. India is not vulnerable to coercion, but is instead a rising force that others must engage with respectfully. It is this blend of prosperity and power that forms the backbone of India's refusal to be undermined and ensures that its voice carries weight in shaping the future global order. Global leadership role is one of the most significant aspects of India's evolving identity in the international system because it highlights not just influence, but responsibility. India has reached a stage where its participation is not limited to being part of discussions, but extends to shaping agendas that affect the entire world. From climate change to digital innovation, from peacekeeping to food security, India has proven that it is capable of taking initiatives that benefit both itself and the global community. The sheer scale of India's population and economy means that its choices ripple across continents, and this makes its role as a leader both inevitable and essential. When India steps forward to commit to renewable energy goals or spearheads initiatives like the International Solar Alliance, it demonstrates not only vision, but the capacity to mobilize cooperation across diverse nations. Such leadership reflects a confidence that India does not wait for others to set the tone, but instead defines new frameworks for collective progress. This leadership is also reflected in India's commitment to peace and stability. As one of the largest contributors to United Nations peacekeeping missions, India has consistently shown that its strength is not limited to defending its borders, but extends to ensuring peace in conflict zones far away. This track record gives India credibility as a nation that does not merely speak of values, but acts upon them. On global platforms, India often champions the voice of the global South, representing countries that may not have the influence to push their concerns into the spotlight. In doing so, India enhances its standing as a bridge between developed and developing nations, reinforcing its image as a nation that can mediate, balance, and propose solutions that resonate universally. The global leadership role also draws strength from India's democratic identity and pluralistic values. In a world where authoritarianism is on the rise, India positions itself as a counterbalance by demonstrating that diversity and freedom can coexist with development and modernization. This gives its voice an authenticity that others cannot easily replicate. By standing firm on issues like equitable vaccine distribution during the pandemic, or advocating for reforms in international institutions that no longer reflect current realities, India pushes for fairness and inclusivity in global governance. Such actions are not about prestige alone, but about creating a global order that aligns with justice and equality. When India asserts its leadership, it sends a strong message that it does not need validation from others, because its record of responsibility and contribution speaks louder than any external judgment. Pride in democratic identity has always been at the center of India's self-image and its interaction with the world, because it distinguishes the country as a true example of pluralism, resilience, and inclusivity. Unlike many nations that merely use democracy as a slogan, India has lived it every single day since independence, despite the challenges of size, diversity, poverty, and regional complexities. The democratic experiment in India is not just a political system, but a way of life, where over 1 billion people of different faiths, languages, and cultures participate in choosing their leaders and shaping their collective destiny. This makes India's democracy not only the largest, but also one of the most vibrant and resilient, a fact that gives it an undeniable moral authority in global debates. When India responds to external criticism, it does so with the conviction that its democratic model has survived tests that others could scarcely imagine, from wars and insurgencies to economic crises and rapid modernization. Yet it has never abandoned the principles of freedom and representation. This pride also plays a crucial role in how India positions itself against those who try to intimidate or undermine it. When pressure is applied from outside, India leans on its democratic foundation as proof that it is accountable to its people, not to external actors. Decisions are made through the will of its electorate and institutions, not through backroom deals with foreign powers, and this independence of choice reinforces India's sovereignty. At a time when authoritarian regimes project power through control and coercion, India demonstrates that true strength comes from the consent of the governed. This makes its political system not a weakness, as critics sometimes claim, but a source of legitimacy and confidence that cannot be replicated by nations that rely on fear or suppression to maintain order. Furthermore, India's democratic pride resonates internationally because it embodies hope for other nations struggling to balance development with freedom. By holding free elections, protecting fundamental rights, and allowing open debate in society, India proves that democracy can thrive even in the most complex environments. Its very survival as a functioning democracy on such a vast scale challenges the idea that authoritarianism is more efficient, showing instead that diversity and liberty can coexist with growth and stability. When India asserts this identity, it is not merely defending its political structure, but elevating a model that inspires many across the world. This pride becomes a shield against external narratives, reminding the world that India's strength lies not only in its economy or military, but in the collective voice of its people, a voice that shapes policies with legitimacy that no outside influence can override. Turning the tables is a powerful aspect of India's response whenever external powers attempt to undermine its position, because it transforms criticism into an opportunity to expose double standards and highlight India's strengths. Instead of being defensive, India often chooses to respond with facts, historical context, and achievements that reveal the contradictions in the arguments of those who try to lecture or pressure it. This ability to flip the narrative ensures that India is not painted as a passive subject of international scrutiny, but as an active voice that commands respect. When outside powers criticize its defense partnerships, India counters by pointing out their own arms deals and military interventions in regions where they had no direct stake. When questions are raised about its economic policies, India highlights the resilience of its economy and the growing reliance of global corporations on its markets. By doing this, India shows that accusations often come from a place of insecurity or hypocrisy rather than genuine concern, and it uses this exposure to strengthen its case in the eyes of the global community. This approach of turning the tables is also evident in how India positions itself in global debates. On climate change, for instance, when it faces criticism for its energy needs, India reminds the world of the historical responsibility of developed nations whose industrialization caused the bulk of environmental damage. On issues of trade, when pressured to open markets unfairly, India highlights the protectionist tendencies of those very nations that promote free trade in rhetoric but erect barriers when it suits them. Such counterpoints are not meant to escalate conflict, but to make the world realize that India cannot be dismissed as a follower. It is a nation capable of holding others accountable to the same standards they attempt to impose. What makes this strategy even more effective is the confidence with which India now projects itself as a solution-oriented power. Instead of dwelling only on exposing hypocrisy, it also offers constructive alternatives, whether in renewable energy, digital innovation, or global security frameworks. This ensures that the act of turning the tables does not come across as mere defiance, but as a mature, responsible assertion of leadership. By flipping narratives and setting its own terms, India not only protects its dignity, but also compels others to engage with it on equal footing. The outcome is clear. Those who attempt to corner India often end up revealing their own inconsistencies, while India walks away, having reinforced its image as a resilient and forward-looking power that thrives on principle and strength. So when critics attempt to lecture, pressure, or intimidate India, they are not dealing with a vulnerable state pleading for approval. They are confronting a confident power that has learned to reject intimidation, expose hypocrisy, and lead with principle. India stands tall today not just because of its economic strength or military might, but because of its unwavering belief in its own sovereignty, its pride in democracy, and its vision for a fairer global order. Every attempt to undermine it only ends up reinforcing its resolve. This is the new reality. India does not bow, India does not break, and India certainly does not beg. And if anyone thought otherwise, they will live to regret underestimating the will of over 1 billion voices united by one timeless truth. India decides for India.